The first time the Vorthak Collective encountered humanity, they made a critical error. They assumed Earth was just another primitive world, ripe for subjugation. Admiral Zex Thul stood on the bridge of the massive dreadnought Bone Crusher, watching the blue-green marble that humans called home slowly rotate beneath his fleet. 237 warships hung in the void around Earth, like hungry predators, their hulls gleaming with the dark metal that had conquered 1,000 worlds. Such a small planet, Zex Thul muttered, his forearms clasped behind his chitinous back. How many billions live down there? Navigation Officer Krell, the younger Vorthak, checked his instruments, mandibles clicking nervously. Approximately 8 billion sentients, Admiral. Primitive technology, mostly chemical rockets and basic orbital stations. Their weapons appear to be kinetic projectiles and simple explosives. Zex Thul's laugh was like grinding stone. The collective had been expanding through the galaxy for 3,000 years, absorbing or destroying every civilization they encountered. Humanity would be no different. The pattern was always the same. Arrive with overwhelming force. Demonstrate superior firepower. Offer surrender terms that amounted to slavery, then harvest the planet's resources and population for the collective's endless war machine. Begin the demonstration, Zex Thul ordered. Target their largest population centers. Make it spectacular but not fatal. We want them afraid, not extinct. Dead slaves serve no purpose. The fleet moved with practiced precision. Energy beams lanced down from orbit, striking empty fields near major cities. The weapons could have vaporized entire continents, but they were carefully calibrated to create impressive craters without causing mass casualties. Shock and awe, the collective called it. Show the primitives their helplessness, and they would surrender quickly. On Earth, the world watched in terror as alien warships appeared in their skies. The craters appeared across 6 continents simultaneously. Near London, New York, Tokyo, Moscow, Beijing, and Sao Paulo. Each blast created a perfectly circular crater 2 miles wide and half a mile deep. The Earth turned to glass at the bottom. The message was clear. We could have killed you all, but we chose not to. Yet, within hours, every nation's leadership was in emergency session. The United Nations called an unprecedented emergency meeting. Military commanders across the globe stared at their screens, knowing that every weapon in humanity's arsenal was useless against technology that could strike from orbit with surgical precision. President Sarah Chen of the United Earth Coalition stood before the emergency assembly, her face grim. Fellow leaders, we face an enemy beyond our current capabilities. These beings have technology centuries ahead of ours. They've demonstrated they can destroy any target on Earth from orbit. Yet they've chosen to issue what appears to be a warning. Wode, what do they want? Asked the Russian representative, his hands shaking as he reached for his water glass. The answer came 12 hours later, broadcast simultaneously on every electronic device on Earth. The translation was perfect, somehow uploaded directly into humanity's communication networks. The alien's voice was cold, mechanical, utterly without emotion. Inhabitants of the planet you call Earth, I am Admiral Zex Thul, of the Vorthak Collective. Your world is now under our dominion. You have witnessed a demonstration of our power. Resistance is futile. You will comply with the following terms within 7 of your rotational periods, or face total annihilation. The terms were exactly what humanity expected, and exactly what they feared. Complete surrender of all military forces. Dismantling of all weapons capable of orbital reach. Immediate cessation of space exploration. Most crushing of all. 20% of Earth's population would be selected for relocation to collective worlds as laborers. The euphemism didn't fool anyone. They meant slaves. You have 7 days to respond, the broadcast concluded. Choose wisely. The collective has conquered 1,047 worlds. Yours will be 1,048, whether through submission or through the ashes of your civilization. The transmission ended, leaving 8 billion humans staring at screens that had returned to normal programming, as if the universe itself was pretending nothing had changed. In the depths of a mountain facility in Colorado, General Marcus Thompson slammed his fist on the conference table. 7 days. They give us 7 days to choose between slavery and extinction. What choice do we have? Asked Dr. Elizabeth Foster, the coalition's chief science advisor. Our most advanced missiles can barely reach low orbit. Their ships are positioned at the edge of our atmosphere. We can't touch them. There has to be something, Thompson growled. Humanity didn't claw its way to the top of Earth's food chain by rolling over when threatened. President Chen's voice was quiet but firm. We're not just going to surrender. Start mobilizing everything we have. Call up every reserve unit on the planet. If we're going to die, we're going to die, fighting. Ma'am, Dr. Foster said carefully, fighting them would be suicide. They have energy weapons that can glass entire continents. Our conventional forces would be slaughtered. Maybe, Thompson said, a dangerous gleam in his eyes. But they made one mistake. They landed troops. Above Earth's atmosphere, Admiral Zex Thull was indeed making his first tactical error. Confident in his overwhelming technological superiority, he had deployed occupation forces to Earth's surface. 10,000 Vorthak warriors in powered armor had landed at strategic points around the globe. Military bases, government centers, major spaceports, their orders were simple. Secure key facilities and begin the process of cataloging human resources. The Vorthak were 7 feet tall, with thick, chitinous exoskeletons and 4 powerful arms ending in clawed hands. Their natural armor could deflect most small arms' fire, and their powered suits made them nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Each warrior carried energy weapons that could slice through tank armor like paper. They had conquered 1,000 worlds with tactics just like these. But humanity was different in ways the collective couldn't understand. In the ruins of what had been downtown London, Sergeant James Mitchell of the British SAS crouched behind the rubble of a centuries-old church, watching a patrol of 3 Vorthak warriors move through the empty streets. His team of 12 men was armed with nothing but conventional weapons, assault rifles, grenades, and whatever improvised explosives they could cobble together from civilian materials. Remember, Mitchell whispered into his radio, their armor can take direct hits from our rifles. But it's not perfect. Joints at the knees and elbows show heat signatures. Their neck seals are thinner, and according to the analysis from other encounters, sustained fire from multiple angles can overload their energy shields. One of his men, Corporal Davies, checked his rifle nervously. Sarge, these things have been taking down our tanks like they're made of cardboard. What are we supposed to accomplish with small arms? Mitchell's smile was cold. We're going to teach them something, Davies. We're going to teach them that humans don't give up. Ever. The patrol rounded the corner, their alien sensors sweeping the area. The Vorthak moved with casual arrogance. Secure in their technological superiority, they had faced resistance on other worlds, but it was always brief. Primitive weapons against collective technology was no contest. The first lesson began when Davies triggered the Claymore mine, hidden in the church doorway. The explosion shattered windows for 3 blocks, and threw all 3 Vorthak warriors to the ground. Their energy shields flickered and failed under the concentrated blast. Before they could recover, 12 human soldiers opened fire from concealed positions, pouring hundreds of rounds into the fallen aliens from every direction. The Vorthak armor held for almost 10 seconds. Then, the joint seals began to fail, and purple blood started to seep through the cracks. 2 of the warriors managed to return fire, their energy beams turning brick walls into molten slag. But human ingenuity had anticipated this. The SAS team was already moving to secondary positions through underground tunnels mapped out over centuries of London's construction. When the firing stopped, 3 Vorthak warriors lay motionless in the rubble, the first collective soldiers to die on Earth. Impossible, whispered Navigation Officer Krell as he watched the tactical display aboard the Bone Crusher. The humans destroyed a patrol with primitive kinetic weapons. Admiral Zexithol's mandibles clicked in annoyance. A lucky ambush. It changes nothing. Order all ground teams to exercise more caution. But the attacks were spreading. In New York, a team of SEAL demolition experts had collapsed an entire skyscraper on a Vorthak squad. burying them under 10,000 tons of concrete and steel. In Tokyo, Japanese self-defense force units had lured an alien patrol into a subway tunnel rigged with enough explosive charges to level a city block. In Moscow, Spetsnaz operators had somehow acquired Vorthak energy weapons and were using them against their former owners. The pattern was always the same: humans using their intimate knowledge of their own terrain, their willingness to sacrifice themselves, and their talent for improvised violence to kill enemies who should have been invulnerable. "Admiral," Krell reported, his voice tight with concern, "we've lost 43 ground teams in the last 18 hours. The humans are adapting." Zex Thul's 4 eyes narrowed. No world had ever inflicted such casualties on collective forces during the initial occupation phase. Most primitives simply surrendered when faced with overwhelming force. Those that fought back usually broke after a few demonstrations of superior firepower. "Begin orbital bombardment of major population centers," he ordered. "If they want to play at war, we'll show them what real destruction looks like." The energy beams that lanced down from space this time were not meant as warnings. The weapons designed to crack the crust of planets focused their fury on human cities. London's ancient heart vanished in a pillar of superheated plasma. A quarter of Tokyo simply ceased to exist, turned to component atoms in seconds. Moscow's Red Square became a crater filled with molten rock. Millions died in the first hour of bombardment. Millions more in the fires that followed. From orbit, Admiral Zex Thul watched the lights of human civilization wink out one by one, satisfied that the lesson was being learned. But in the underground bunkers where humanity's leaders had taken shelter, the response was not surrender. It was something the Vorthak had never encountered in 1,000 conquered worlds. "They want to play extermination?" General Thompson's voice was steady, but his eyes blazed with cold fury. "Then let's show them what happens when you try to exterminate humans." President Chen's hands shook as she signed the authorization codes. "Execute Protocol Samson. All units, all weapons, everything we have. If we're going to die, we're taking as many of them with us as possible." Across Earth, hidden military installations that the aliens had never detected came online. Missile silos buried in the deepest parts of the ocean opened their doors. Submarines that had been running silent since the invasion began received their final orders. Nuclear arsenals that humanity had spent decades building for a war that never came were finally unleashed. But not at Earth. At the alien fleet hanging in orbit, like ripe fruit, the first wave of intercontinental ballistic missiles erupted from their silos in perfect synchronization, modified with every piece of experimental technology humanity possessed, pushed beyond their design limits, carrying warheads that had been secretly upgraded with technology reverse-engineered from crashed alien probes over the decades. "Incoming projectiles," Krell reported, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Admiral, they're targeting us directly." Zex Thul laughed. "Primitive chemical rockets against collective shields? They'll burn up in our defensive grids before they get within." The first nuclear warhead detonated against the Bone Crusher's shields at exactly the moment when 47 others arrived from different vectors. The overlapping electromagnetic pulses from the explosions created a cascade failure in the alien defense systems. For just 17 seconds, the mighty dreadnought was vulnerable. That was all humanity needed. The second wave consisted of weapons that didn't exist in any official military inventory. Kinetic bombardment satellites that had been secretly launched and positioned years earlier. Experimental laser arrays built into the world's largest radio telescopes. Particle accelerators in research facilities around the globe, hastily reconfigured to fire coherent beams of accelerated matter at significant fractions of the speed of light. The Bone Crusher died like a giant beast brought down by 1,000 cuts. Its hull cracked under the kinetic impacts, its power core destabilized by particle beam bombardment, its life support systems failing as human ingenuity found every weakness in alien engineering. Admiral Zex Thul felt his ship dying around him as gravity failed and atmosphere began venting into space. In his final moments, as emergency bulkheads sealed him into what would become his tomb, he made a discovery that would have changed everything if he had lived to report it. The humans weren't primitive. They were pretending to be primitive. The radio telescopes that had fired particle beams at his fleet were far more advanced than the collective's initial scans had suggested. The nuclear weapons that had overwhelmed his shields used fusion technology that shouldn't have existed on a world just discovering spaceflight. The kinetic satellites had been positioned with a precision that required mathematical models the collective hadn't expected from this species. Earth wasn't a primitive world that had just discovered fire. It was a world that had been preparing for exactly this kind of war. As the Bone Crusher broke apart in Earth's upper atmosphere, its debris raining down like falling stars, Admiral Zex Thule transmitted his final message to the collective fleet. 4 words that would echo through Vorthok Command for generations. They were ready for us. Commander Thekvar of the Vorthak Second Fleet watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. Where Admiral Zexthal's mighty dreadnought had hung in space just hours before, there was now only debris and the fading radiation signature of a catastrophic reactor breach. 47 other collective warships had suffered similar fates, their hulls cracked open like eggs by weapons that shouldn't have existed on this primitive world. Impossible, Thekvar muttered, his forearms trembling slightly. The humans destroyed 53 ships with chemical rockets and primitive energy weapons. His tactical officer, a scarred veteran named Grixaddle, who had seen the conquest of 40 worlds, studied the sensor data with mounting horror. Commander, these weren't chemical rockets. Analysis of the debris patterns suggests fusion-enhanced warheads with yields approaching our own torpedo systems. The kinetic impacts show projectiles moving at 12% of light speed. And these particle beam signatures, what about them? They're more focused than our own weapons, sir. Somehow these primitives have achieved better particle coherence than collective technology. Thekvar felt something he had never experienced in 3 decades of warfare. Fear. Not the healthy caution of a soldier facing a dangerous enemy, but the deep, existential terror of realizing that everything he thought he knew about this war was wrong. The remaining collective fleet, 184 ships that had escaped the initial human assault, hung at the edge of the solar system, trying to process what had just happened. The Vorthak military doctrine was built on overwhelming technological superiority. They had energy shields that could deflect asteroids, weapons that could crack planets, and armor that laughed at primitive kinetic rounds. No species they had ever encountered could challenge them in open battle. But humans had just destroyed nearly a quarter of their invasion fleet using weapons that their initial scans had classified as barely capable of reaching orbit. Commander, the communications officer reported, we're receiving a transmission from Earth, human origin, broadcasting on all frequencies. Let me hear it. The voice that came through the speakers was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. It was President Sarah Chen, speaking from deep within humanity's command bunkers, to the surviving ships of the Vorthok Collective. You came to our world expecting to find primitives armed with sticks and stones. You found something else entirely. Your admiral demanded our surrender. We offer you our terms instead. Thekvar's mandibles clicked in nervous agitation. A primitive species was dictating terms to the collective? The very concept was beyond his understanding. You have 24 hours to withdraw all remaining forces from our solar system. Any ship that remains after that deadline will be destroyed. Any attempt to land additional troops on Earth will result in the complete annihilation of your fleet. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. The transmission continued, and what Chen said next made Thekvar's blood freeze in his veins. You should know that Earth was not unprepared for this day. We have been expecting you, or someone like you. For over 50 years, every weapon you've seen today was designed specifically to kill ships like yours. We know about your shields, your armor, your weapons, because we've been studying wreckage from your scout probes for decades. On Earth, the truth was finally being revealed. In 1973, a Vorthak scout probe had crashed in the Siberian wilderness. Soviet scientists, sworn to absolute secrecy, had spent years reverse engineering the technology. When the Cold War ended, that research had been shared with a secret international consortium dedicated to preparing Earth for the day when the probe's creators came looking for their lost scout. The crashed probe had told humanity everything they needed to know about collective technology. The frequency harmonics of their shields, the molecular composition of their armor, the energy signatures of their weapons. For 50 years, Earth's brightest minds had worked in absolute secrecy, developing countermeasures for an enemy they had never seen, but knew would eventually come. The nuclear weapons that had overwhelmed the collective shields weren't just fusion bombs. They were fusion bombs, specifically tuned to create electromagnetic pulse patterns that would cascade through Vorthak shield generators. The particle accelerators hidden in radio telescopes hadn't been built for scientific research. They had been constructed as long-range anti-ship weapons, capable of punching through alien hull armor at interplanetary distances. Even humanity's apparent primitive state had been carefully orchestrated. Earth's space program had been deliberately held back in visible ways, while secret facilities constructed and launched military satellites, disguised as communications equipment. The International Space Station wasn't just a research facility, it was a command and control center for an orbital defense network that the aliens had never detected. "We allowed you to land troops on our planet," Chen's voice continued, "because we wanted to test our weapons against your armor. Thank you for providing such excellent target practice. Your soldiers' equipment has been very educational." In the London ruins where Sergeant Mitchell and his SAS team had first blooded the aliens, a very different kind of analysis was taking place. Dr. Helen Carver, Britain's leading xenobiologist, knelt beside the corpse of a Vorthak warrior, carefully extracting tissue samples, while military engineers dismantled the creature's powered armor piece by piece. "Remarkable," she murmured into her recording device. "The exoskeleton is nearly impervious to small arms fire, but the joint articulations have a critical weakness. The armor segments overlap in a pattern that creates stress concentration points when subjected to sustained multi-directional pressure." Around her, Royal engineers were using plasma cutters technology, reverse-engineered from the crashed probe, to section the aliens' energy weapons. Every component was being catalogued, analyzed, and added to humanity's growing understanding of collective technology. "The energy projection system is surprisingly inefficient," reported Major Sandra Torres, the lead weapons analyst. "They're using a brute force approach that wastes enormous amounts of power. Our equivalent systems could achieve the same destructive effect with 60% less energy consumption." This was happening at crash sites around the globe. In Tokyo, Japanese scientists were discovering that Vorthak computer systems used quantum processing methods that were actually less sophisticated than experimental human designs. In New York, American engineers were reverse engineering alien propulsion technology that was powerful but crudely designed compared to theoretical human antimatter engines that had never been built due to resource constraints. The terrible truth was becoming clear. The Vorthak Collective was technologically superior to humanity in raw power, but inferior in efficiency, innovation, and tactical flexibility. They had conquered 1,000 worlds through overwhelming force, never needing to develop the kind of ingenious solutions that humanity specialized in. But Commander Thekvar, hanging at the edge of the solar system with his remaining fleet, didn't understand any of this yet. He only knew that his supposedly invincible armada had just been mauled by a species that built rockets with chemical fuel. His response was exactly what humanity had expected: overwhelming retaliation. "Signal the fleet," Thekvar ordered, his voice shaking with rage and humiliation. "We will show these primitives what happens when they defy the collective. Begin total planetary bombardment. I want every major landmass reduced to molten slag." "Sir," Grixtal said hesitantly, "perhaps we should report back to Central Command first. This situation is unprecedented." "No!" Thekvar's scream echoed through the bridge. "We will not return to the collective, having been defeated by primitives. Ready the planet killers. Earth dies today." The Vorthak fleet began moving toward Earth with their most powerful weapons charging: planet-killer missiles that could shatter continental plates, directed energy arrays that could boil oceans, kinetic bombardment systems that could punch through a world's crust and destabilize its core. They were going to commit genocide on a scale that would make their previous bombardment look like a gentle shower. On Earth, humanity watched them coming and smiled grimly. This, too, had been anticipated. "Contact Beijing, Moscow, and Geneva," President Chen ordered. "Tell them it's time for Phase 2. In the depths of the Pacific Ocean, Something that had never appeared on any satellite photograph began to stir. Project Deep Strike had been humanity's most classified military program. Funded by a secret coalition of nations, and built using technology that officially didn't exist. The facility was the size of Manhattan, constructed in an oceanic trench 7 miles below the surface, powered by geothermal taps that reached into Earth's mantle itself. Admiral Sarah Morrison of the Earth Defense Force stood in the facility's command center, watching displays that showed the alien fleet approaching at maximum acceleration. Morrison was one of only 37 people on Earth who knew what humanity's secret weapon actually was. "Ma'am," reported Commander Liu from the weapons control station, "the collective fleet will be within minimum effective range in 47 minutes. All enemy ships are running with shields at maximum power and weapons charging." "Perfect," Morrison said. "They're so focused on Earth, they're not watching behind them." Begin emergence sequence. 26,000 miles behind the Vorthak fleet, space began to ripple like water. The distortions were subtle at first, barely detectable even by collective sensors. Then, with no warning, reality seemed to tear open like fabric. The UES Retribution emerged from hyperspace like a predator materializing from shadow. The ship was impossible. It was 5 miles long, its hull a dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its weapons arrays bristled with technology that looked eerily similar to collective designs, but refined, perfected, made elegant where alien engineering was crude. Most impossibly of all, it was moving under power that registered as a stable antimatter reaction, technology that should have taken humanity centuries to develop. Commander Thekvar stared at the tactical display showing the human ship that had appeared behind his fleet. His mind simply refused to process what he was seeing. How had primitives developed faster than light travel? Where had they gotten antimatter technology? How had they built a ship that his sensors were reading as more powerful than his own flagship? "Sir," Grixtal's voice was barely a whisper, "that ship is powering weapons. Energy signatures are off our charts." The Retribution's first salvo answered 50 years of human questions about collective shields. Plasma bolts that burned hotter than the surface of stars punched through Vorthak defenses like they didn't exist. Particle beams that could cut through planetary cores opened collective hulls from bow to stern in single strikes. Kinetic rounds, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed, turned alien armor into expanding clouds of superheated vapor. 12 collective warships died in the first 30 seconds of the engagement. "Return fire!" Thekvar screamed. "All ships, concentrate fire on that vessel." The remaining ships of the collective fleet turned their weapons on humanity's impossible warship. Energy beams that could glass continents struck the Retribution's shields and simply stopped. Particle bombardments that had cracked moons dissipated harmlessly against human defensive systems. Even the devastating planet-killer missiles exploded uselessly against barriers that seemed to be made of crystallized space itself. "How?" Grixtal asked, his voice breaking. "How are they doing this?" The answer was terrifyingly simple. The crashed probe hadn't been just a source of technology to reverse engineer. It had been a teacher. Humanity's best minds had spent 50 years not just copying collective technology, but improving it. Every weakness in alien design had been identified and corrected. Every inefficiency had been optimized. Every limitation had been surpassed. The Retribution wasn't just a human ship using stolen technology. It was what collective technology could become when wielded by a species that saw war as a puzzle to be solved, rather than a contest of brute force. As the Vorthak fleet died ship by ship, Admiral Morrison opened a communication channel to the surviving enemy vessels. Her message was broadcast in perfect collective military dialect. Another impossibility that sent chills through every alien survivor. "Vorthak ships, you are outgunned, outnumbered, and outclassed. Your weapons cannot penetrate our defenses. Your shields cannot stop our weapons. You have 60 seconds to begin immediate withdrawal from this system, or you will be destroyed." Commander Thekvar looked around his bridge at his terrified crew, then at the tactical display showing 2/3 of his fleet already reduced to debris. The human ship hadn't even taken damage. Its shields showed no sign of strain despite absorbing the firepower of nearly 200 alien warships. "Sir," Grixtal said quietly. We should retreat. No. Thekvar's voice was hollow. Defeated, but still stubborn. We are Vorthak. We do not retreat. We do not surrender. Signal the remaining ships, full power to weapons, ramming speed. What happened next would be remembered in collective records as the Battle of Sol, and among humans as the day Earth showed the galaxy what happens when you threaten their species. The remaining Vorthak fleet, 47 ships that had conquered worlds and shattered fleets, charged toward the single human vessel in a final, desperate assault. They came with weapons blazing, shields at maximum power, crews screaming war cries that had echoed across 1,000 battlefields. The retribution met them head-on, and it was beautiful. Humanity's impossible ship danced between the alien vessels like a predator among prey, its weapons speaking with voices of thunder and starfire. Each shot was perfectly placed, each maneuver calculated to maximum effect. The human vessel fought not like a ship, but like a living thing, graceful and deadly, and absolutely unstoppable. When it was over, when the last collective ship had been reduced to expanding debris, Admiral Morrison sent one final message toward the empty space where the Vorthak fleet had been. Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that Earth is not a world to be conquered. Tell them that humanity is not a species to be enslaved. And tell them that if they want to survive, they should choose their next target more carefully. The message was transmitted on all frequencies, using collective communication protocols, ensuring that it would be received by every Vorthak facility within 50 light-years. But Morrison wasn't finished. Computer, signal Earth command. Tell them to begin. Phase 3. Acknowledged, Admiral. Phase 3 authorized. Long-range reconnaissance fleets are launching now. As the Retribution began its journey back to Earth, humanity's secret space program revealed its final surprise. Hidden bases on the far side of the moon opened like flowers, revealing sleek vessels that had been built in absolute secrecy. Not just one impossible ship, but dozens of them. Each one a masterpiece of human engineering, enhanced with 50 years of alien technology. The reconnaissance fleets spread out through space like arrows shot from Earth's bow, their destinations carefully plotted. Every collective outpost, every slave world, every military facility that the crashed probe's databases had revealed. Humanity was done hiding. Humanity was done waiting. Humanity was going to war. And this time, the Vorthak Collective would learn what it meant to face a species that had spent its entire evolution fighting everything that tried to kill them, including each other. A species that had looked at every weapon ever invented and asked, not, is this powerful enough? But how can we make it more powerful? Is this powerful? A species that had just proven that the most dangerous thing in the universe wasn't the monster that everyone feared. It was the monster that everyone underestimated. High Admiral Vex Thulin of the Vorthak Collective stood in the command chamber of the fortress world Carthex, staring at reports that defied everything he thought he knew about the galaxy. In 73 years of military service, through the conquest of 200 worlds and the subjugation of countless species, he had never seen anything like what was happening along the Collective's outer rim. Tell me again, he said to Intelligence Coordinator Zithmal, his voice carefully controlled. How many systems have gone silent? Zithmal's 4 hands trembled as she consulted her datapad. 47 systems in the past 30 rotations, High Admiral. No distress calls, no battle reports, no communication of any kind. The outposts simply stop responding. Equipment failure? Unlikely, sir. We sent investigation teams to the first 12 systems that went dark. None of the teams returned. Long-range sensors show no debris fields. No signs of battle damage. The installations are simply empty. Vex Thulin's mandibles clicked in agitation. The Vorthak Collective controlled over 3,000 star systems, but 47 bases didn't just disappear without reason. What about the deep space monitoring stations? They must have detected something. That's the disturbing part, sir. The monitoring stations report brief hyperspace distortions, then nothing. Whatever is hitting our outposts is fast, surgical, and leaves no witnesses. On the other side of the galaxy, Admiral Sarah Morrison stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the final phase of Operation Cleansing Wind through tactical displays that showed information the Vorthak could never detect. Humanity's reconnaissance fleets had spent 6 months mapping every collective installation within 200 light-years of Earth, and now the real war was beginning. Strike Team 7 reports mission complete, Commander Liu announced from the communications station. Car Vegas mining facility has been liberated. Estimated 18,000 human slaves rescued. All collective personnel eliminated. Morrison nodded grimly. The pattern was always the same. Humanity's stealth ships would emerge from hyperspace at the edge of a system, their advanced sensors sweeping for life signs and energy signatures. If they found humans in chains, the liberation would be swift and total. If they found only Vorthak, the elimination would be even swifter. Any casualties among our forces? None, Admiral. The collective defenders never knew what hit them. That was the terrible truth that High Admiral Vex Thulin was beginning to understand. Humanity wasn't just technologically superior now, they were fighting with a cold, methodical precision that the Vorthak had never encountered. Every human ship was equipped with weapons that could punch through collective shields like paper, powered by antimatter reactors that provided virtually unlimited energy, and protected by defensive systems that made them effectively invulnerable to alien technology. But the technology was only part of the horror. The real nightmare was how humans fought. The Vorthak collective had conquered through overwhelming force and intimidation. Their tactics were simple: arrive with superior numbers, demonstrate devastating firepower, demand surrender, then strip the conquered world of resources and population. It had worked for 3,000 years across 1,000 different species. Humans fought differently. They arrived like ghosts, struck like lightning, and vanished before anyone could respond. They used the collective's own communication networks against them, somehow bypassing every security protocol to plant viruses that crashed entire planetary defense grids. They rescued slaves while simultaneously destroying the infrastructure that had oppressed them. Most terrifyingly of all, they seemed to know exactly where every collective base was located, as if they had perfect intelligence on facilities that should have been completely secret. "Hi, Admiral," Zithmal said hesitantly. "There's something else. We've been intercepting fragmentary transmissions from the outer systems, before they go silent." "What kind of transmissions?" "Human voices, sir. Speaking in collective dialects. Perfect pronunciation, military terminology used correctly. They're recruiting." Vex Thulin felt his blood chill. "Recruiting whom?" "The slave population, sir. They're broadcasting on frequencies that only the enslaved species know how to access, telling them that Earth has come to free them, teaching them to fight back, across collective space." That was exactly what was happening. Humanity had learned something from the crashed probe's databases that had fundamentally changed their understanding of the galactic situation. The Vorthak collective wasn't just an empire of conquerors, it was an empire built on the backs of 100 enslaved species, many of whom had been reduced to chattel so long they had forgotten they had ever been free. But humans remembered. Humans had spent their entire history fighting against oppression, and they recognized the signs in others. Every liberated world became a rallying point. Every freed slave became a recruit in humanity's growing coalition. The message was always the same. Earth remembers what freedom means, and Earth is here to help you remember too. On the mining world of Car Vegas, former slave overseer Theknul cowered in the ruins of what had been the collective administrative center, watching human soldiers move through the facility with mechanical precision. They wore armor that seemed to bend light around it, carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy, and moved with the coordinated efficiency of a species that had turned warfare into an art form. Captain Maria Santos, of Earth Defense Force Marine Unit 7, stood over the alien, her helmet's translator converting her words into collective standard. "Where are the human prisoners being held?" Theknul's 4 eyes darted frantically around the destroyed command center. I don't know what you're talking about. There are no prisoners here. Only workers." Santos's armored gauntlet grabbed the alien by his throat and lifted him 3 feet off the ground. Her voice remained perfectly calm, which somehow made it more terrifying. Let me explain something to you. We know that this facility uses human labor. We know that humans are being worked to death in your mines. We know that children are being bred specifically for slavery. I am going to ask you one more time. Where are they? Level 14. Theknul gasped. Sub-basement. But you don't understand, without the collective, this system will collapse. The economy, the trade routes, everything depends on. Santos dropped him and turned to her squad. Jenkins, Rodriguez, take Alpha Team to level 14. Full liberation protocol. Nguyen, set charges on the mining equipment. Chen, start evacuating the other species. And Martinez? Yes, Captain? Signal the fleet. Tell them we need transport for approximately 20,000 freed prisoners. And tell them to prep the medical bays. Some of these people haven't seen sunlight in generations. This scene was playing out across dozens of worlds simultaneously. Human forces would arrive without warning. Eliminate collective resistance with weapons that seemed almost magical in their effectiveness. Then begin the systematic liberation of every enslaved being they could find. The freed slaves were given a choice. Return to their homeworlds if they still existed. Settle on one of the many worlds that humanity was establishing as free colonies, or join the growing coalition forces that were spreading across the galaxy like wildfire. Most chose to fight. High Admiral Vex Thulan stood before the Grand Council of the Collective, his career in ruins around him. The holographic displays showed a tactical situation that would have been unthinkable 6 months earlier. Red zones marked systems that had gone silent. Yellow zones indicated areas where slave uprisings were spreading faster than they could be suppressed. Green zones, areas still under full collective control, were shrinking daily. Explain to us, Grand Counselor Morthek demanded, how a single primitive world has managed to destabilize half our territory. They were never primitive, Vex Thulan said quietly. Our intelligence was wrong. Completely wrong. Earth had technology equal to or superior to ours. And they were prepared for our attack. Impossible. Our scouts reported chemical rockets and kinetic weapons. Our scouts saw what humanity wanted them to see. Every piece of military equipment they displayed was deliberately chosen to make us underestimate them. While we thought they were learning to reach their own moon, they were building faster than light warships. While we thought they were divided into primitive nation-states, they were unified under a secret global government that had spent decades preparing for our arrival. Morthek's mandibles clicked dismissively. Even so, one world cannot challenge an empire of 3,000 systems. It's not one world anymore, Vex Thulan replied. Intelligence estimates that over 60 species have joined their coalition. They're not just liberating our slaves, they're turning them into soldiers. Every world they free becomes a base of operations for further expansion. The truth was even worse than Vex Thulan knew. In the depths of space between the stars, humanity was constructing something that would have given the Grand Council nightmares if they had known it existed. Hidden in the gravitational shadow of rogue planets, massive shipyards were turning out vessels that incorporated not just human technology, but improvements suggested by the dozens of freed species that had joined Earth's cause. Admiral Morrison walked through one such facility, marveling at the integration of technologies that had never been designed to work together. Vorthak energy weapons powered by human antimatter reactors, shield generators based on collective designs but improved with mathematical principles discovered by a species that had been enslaved for 3 centuries, faster-than-light drives that combined human engineering with propulsion theories developed by a race that had been extinct for 1,000 years, preserved only in the memories of their enslaved descendants. How many ships can we field now? Morrison asked Commander Liu, who had been promoted to oversee production planning. Current estimates put us at 1,200 capital ships and approximately 4,000 support vessels, Liu replied. But the numbers are growing exponentially as more species contribute their knowledge and industrial capacity. Morrison nodded, then activated a secure communication channel that connected her to Earth Command. President Chen's face appeared on the display, older now but with eyes that burned with the same determination that had led humanity through its darkest hour. Madam President, Morrison said formally, the coalition forces are ready for Phase 4. Chen's smile was cold as starlight. Begin the offensive, Admiral. It's time to end this. What happened next would be remembered as the War of Liberation, though historians would argue about when it actually began. Some said it started when humanity destroyed the Vorthak invasion fleet. Others claimed it began with the first liberated slave world. But most agreed that the true war started when 1,200 human warships emerged from hyperspace simultaneously at 47 different collective strongholds, supported by vessels crewed by representatives of 63 liberated species. The Battle of Carthex was typical of the conflicts that followed. High Admiral Vex Thulin watched from the Fortress World's command center as his sensors detected impossible readings. A human fleet that outnumbered his defenders 3-1. Equipped with weapons that made his most powerful ships look like toys, approaching with mathematical precision that spoke of coordination beyond anything the collective had ever achieved. All ships, defensive formation, he ordered, knowing it was hopeless. Signal Central Command. Tell them, communications are down, sir, reported his aide. They're jamming everything. The human fleet didn't bother with demands for surrender. They had learned from liberated prisoners what the collective did to species that defied them, and they had decided that some enemies didn't deserve mercy. The retribution led the assault, its weapons speaking with voices of judgment and retribution. Plasma bolts that burned with the fury of dying stars carved through collective ships like they were made of paper. Particle beams that could cut planets in half opened alien hulls from stem to stern. But the humans weren't alone. Fighting beside them were ships crewed by beings whose names the collective had tried to erase from history. The Veltar, master shipbuilders who had been enslaved for their engineering skills. The Mordoon, whose mathematical insights had revolutionized human shield technology. The Kethvar, whose hatred of their former masters burned even hotter than human fury. High Admiral Vex Thulin died with his ship, watching through the bridge viewports as his mighty fortress world burned beneath orbital bombardment that turned collective military installations into glass and ash, while carefully preserving the slave quarters where millions of beings waited for freedom. The message that spread through collective space after Carthex fell was simple and terrifying. Humanity remembers. Humanity comes for all who are enslaved. Humanity shows no mercy to those who profit from suffering. Within a year, the Vorthak collective had collapsed completely. Their remaining worlds either surrendered voluntarily or were liberated by force. The Grand Council was tried for crimes against sapient life by a tribunal that included representatives from every species they had oppressed. Most were sentenced to life imprisonment on a world where they would experience the same conditions they had imposed on their slaves. But humanity wasn't finished. The galaxy was full of species who preyed on the weak. Empires built on conquest and oppression. Civilizations that saw slavery as just another resource to be exploited. Earth had tasted the sweet satisfaction of justice served with overwhelming firepower, and they found they had an appetite for more. Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of the Retribution, now the flagship of the Galactic Liberation Alliance, watching the construction of humanity's newest and most ambitious project. The shipyard was the size of a small moon, powered by an artificial star, and building vessels that incorporated the best technology and knowledge of over 100 freed species. The new dreadnoughts will be ready within 6 months, Commander Liu reported. Each one capable of liberating an entire system single-handedly. Morrison nodded, then opened a communication channel to the Alliance Council, where representatives of 127 species worked together to plan the galaxy's future. Her message was broadcast on all frequencies, in every known language, ensuring that it would reach every corner of civilized space. To any species, any empire, any government that profits from the suffering of others, Earth remembers, the Alliance remembers. We are coming for you, and we are bringing justice. You can surrender the enslaved now, while you still have the chance to live as free beings. Or you can wait for us to arrive and discover what total annihilation actually means. The message ended, but its impact echoed across the galaxy. In 1,000 different systems, slavers and oppressors looked up at the stars and wondered when the humans would come. Some of them began freeing their prisoners immediately. Others began preparing for war. It didn't matter. Humanity had learned something that would reshape the galaxy forever. Sometimes the only way to achieve peace is to be so terrifyingly good at war that nobody dares to threaten it. And humans, it turned out, were very good at war indeed. The galaxy would never be the same.